A transcript of this podcast episode is available in the show notes of the Buzzsprout podcast site, or if you are listening on another podcast player, you can go to storiesfrompalestine.info and read along in the related blog post for this episode. You are listening to Stories from Palestine podcast, a podcast that is recorded in Palestine and about Palestine. My name is Crystal. I am a Dutch woman who is married to a Palestinian, and I live with my husband and 2 children in Beit Sahour between Jerusalem and Bethlehem. I study the tour guide program at the Bethlehem Bible College, and I produce a weekly podcast about the history and cultural heritage of Palestine. If you want to get a weekly email reminder when a new episode is online, if you want to follow the podcast for photos and extra content on social media, or if you want to do a much appreciated donation on the Ko-fi platform, then click on the link in the show notes of this podcast. A couple of weeks ago, I prepared this podcast episode, which I then postponed because of the very difficult situation we were experiencing in Palestine. Instead, I produced 2 episodes to give historical background and context and updates from the ground. But I had this episode ready, and that's good because I had no energy to work on something else this week. The topic of this week's episode is olive wood and olive wood carving, and I made this episode upon special request of Dylan from Wales, who is a woodworker himself. It is possible on the Ko-fi platform to request a topic when you go to the Ko-fi shop. Then you can do your donation there and request a special episode. I did make a disclaimer there that if I cannot make it possible, or if I don't want to make an episode about your requested topic, that I will refund you. For this episode, I interviewed Elias Abuzuluf from Beit Sahour, whom I know through the Bible College where we both studied the tour guide program. By the way, we are finishing the semester this week, and then we will get our tour guide diploma after 2 years of studying. Elias is from Beit Sahour, and it is nice to mention that in June 2020, about a year ago, the town of Beit Sahour was recognized by the World Craft Council as World Craft City for the year 2020. The World Craft Council is a UNESCO-affiliated organization. It was founded in New York in 1964, and it promotes and supports craft work. Why is it so important to have this recognition? Well, it will allow a special sticker that is provided by UNESCO to be affixed to the objects that are made in Beit Sahour, and this will contribute to the promotion of the local craftsmanship. And obviously, it will be an important way to put Palestine in general and Beit Sahour in particular on the tourism map. Beit Sahour is promoting itself now as the place where the angel appeared to the shepherds in the shepherd's field to announce the birth of Jesus, but now it can also promote itself for being recognized as World Craft City. I'm sitting here in a beautiful souvenir shop. This is a shop of Elias Abuzuluf. He's also a student at the Bethlehem Bible College, and we are in the same class. I am both your fellow student and your teacher, which is always a little bit awkward. I've been here before a couple of times, and your shop is quite big. This is your family shop, and I'm really happy that you have time to talk a little bit about the olive wood. Before we start talking about that, can you tell me a little bit about yourself before we start?
My name is Elias Abuzuluf. I am a local Palestinian Christian in Bethlehem. I have been working in the olive wood industry and the handicrafts since I was 17 years old. So it's like 13 years now. I'm 30 years old. I have been studying in the Bethlehem Bible College with you. It's have been a pleasure and honor studying with you. It's great, helping us a lot. I'm a Christian, so this industry of the olive wood handicrafts is very important for us as locals here. People prefer to buy olive wood from the Holy Land, and they come all over the place to visit the birthplace of Jesus Christ and get some souvenirs from here or from Jerusalem or from Nazareth. So this is basically my life.
And Elias, are you married or are you single?
This is a very interesting story. I got engaged during the COVID-19 time. So I found my future wife during the COVID-19. So it was good and bad at the same time. You know how bad it is because it's affected our tourism. Like we didn't work for the past year and a half nearly. But it was good on the, let's say, personal side. I found my future wife and we're getting married in 2 months in July. So it is interesting and it's been a good experience during this COVID-19.
Yeah, we should talk a little bit more about that as well, about how COVID-19 affected the tourism industry here. But before we do that, about the shop where we are here, it is a big shop. I can see a lot of olive wood products, but I also see a lot of other products that are not necessarily made of olive wood. There are baskets, there are little boxes, there are hangers for in the Christmas tree. There are sculptures, but I also see hats with Jerusalem on it or wallets. It's a real souvenir shop. How did you start this business? How do you invest in something like this? How did you come to think, well, you know what, my life will be in a souvenir shop?
This one is really interesting story. Like my main focus was having an olive wood factory and then let's say having a small shop to wholesale, to sell to other souvenir shops in Bethlehem, in Jerusalem, or outside the United States, to Europe. But at one time, it was by mistake, some group from Germany came to our store and it was really, we didn't have any of those shelves that you're going to see all over the place. It was just, let's say, carton boxes with some products on them. And they came and they bought. It was really good at that time. So it got me the idea, why not open a souvenir shop? I'm going to open the shop anyway, and let's try bring some tourists. So it got started. Now, as a souvenir shop, you have to have everything that tourists might love to take back to their family or loved ones. So we have a Christmas ornaments for the trees, as hangers on the trees. Those are Suraic boxes. This is, let's say, made in Syria and some in Egypt, and they have the mother of pearl inlaid on them. Just like, let's say, in Europe or Asia, they inlay the guitars with mother of pearl. So nearly the same thing. Some chessboards also, some rosaries, nativities, where you put the scene with Mary, Joseph, and baby Jesus, and the wise men or the kings or the magi's, whatever you like to call them. Some statues of saints. Some have the lion and the lamb, which is very symbolic, very interesting. Some have Jesus Christ. And it's really a mix. Like you can nearly find everything related to Christianity, many also related to Judaism, and many related to Islam. So everything have their own section, but the biggest market we have are the Christians. So we have many things for the Catholics, many things for the Protestants, and even we have Dead Sea products. We see the mud, you see the creams. So you have like a mix of everything nearly.
Yeah, and I know that in Bethlehem, souvenir shops play a very important role also in tourism when it comes to receiving groups and doing tour guiding. Can you explain how that works here?
Now, when, let's say, for example, if a tour company want to send us a group here, we have to provide the guide and we pay the expense of the guide. And, you know, it's like in all tourism business all over the place. You have to pay a small commission to the tour company or the drivers and the guides. But that's why I'm studying tour guiding, because instead of paying the guide, I can do it for free, only spending my time, and I can get the buses to my community shop or my family shop. So it's going to be very interesting. So this is one of the main focuses why I'm studying the tour guiding. Also, I love the guiding. It's really interesting. And it's been a pleasure studying with you and with Haytham. Lots of information.
Yeah, we're in the final week, so we are still studying a lot. Yeah. Do you also ship abroad? Do you export products?
Yes. The exports in the past was really good, but these days it's not. Now, especially during COVID-19, because most places that we sell in the United States, in Canada, in Europe are closed. So even the churches, you know, many of our, let's say, family members, they go outside and they place a small table outside the church and they sell some handicrafts. Most of them don't anymore because it's not allowed in the church. Even people like really limited, or not many people go to the churches because of the restrictions of the COVID-19. So they don't. And it's have been really bad, but we hope things are going to be open up again soon. So we have export. We also sell some companies. We sell to some, let's say, Christmas markets in Germany. It's interesting. But these days, it's not. It can hardly pay the exports. All the total we paying is hardly pay the salaries of the staff. Hardly. And it doesn't really.
Wow, yeah. Bethlehem is completely depending on tourism. A lot of people, it's the guides, it's the hotels, it's the tour organizations, the restaurants, and the souvenir shops. So you have been hit very hard by the COVID. What is the future perspective of what's going to happen? When do you expect that tourism will return to Bethlehem?
Now, to Bethlehem, because Bethlehem is in Palestinian areas and under Palestinian Authority control, and it's not going to be back anytime soon. So it need at least 3 to 6 months, and it's going to start very, very slowly, and it could be even more time. Now, there is many restrictions from Israel that we can't bring at the moment. It's to all tour companies. They can't bring any tourists to Palestinian areas. So any tourist going to visit Israel these days, they're not allowed to enter Bethlehem or Jericho. So it's going to take us a very long time, maybe at least 6 months till we get some tourism. At the moment, we're getting some tourism from, let's say, from local people living inside Israel, and they're coming to visit us these days, which is good, but very few, and it's not like, it's less than 1% of what you used to have.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. People in tourism now should probably focus more on domestic tourism and on people who are from the country, which actually I did a podcast episode last week about hiking and climbing. And that is something that really took a quick move because a lot of people here, Palestinians, wanted to go and explore their own country. And yeah, they started to go on hiking and climbing activities. Yeah. How did COVID-19 hit you as a family or as a woodworker?
Now, Crystal, the biggest people or the most people who got damaged really bad from COVID-19 are, okay, the hotels, like no work, souvenir shops, no work, tour guides, no work. But the biggest people who affect them the most are the olive wood workshops and the mother of pearl workshops, the handicrafts people, because, you know, they have really low income, like compared to other salaries, let's say inside Israel or other places. So these people depend on getting salary week by week. So if they don't get paid by, let's say, Saturday, they're going to have big problem, let's say, buying stuff for their family or the household items for their family, you know, food and stuff. So the most people are this handicrafts industry. Also, like anytime you can open a hotel, for example, or a souvenir shop, but the handicrafts, this is a tradition that's have been passed generations, like since the 13th century or even since the Crusader times. So this one was affected the most. Now, this tradition of carving these pieces of olive wood, some pieces, some specialties, not anybody can do them. It's really hard. Many people went to go work in construction. Many people went to go work in other things to feed their families, to pay their debts. So this industry lost many olive wood workshops and many closed, of course, and many not sure if they're going to open back again. So the most people that were damaged is this old Palestinian tradition of the handicrafts.
Can you tell me something about that? About the woodwork in Palestine, about the history of that. How did Bethlehem become so known for the olive wood industry?
People, Crystal, in Bethlehem have been carving olive wood for a very long time. Now, the other day I went to Wikipedia and was like olive wood carvings in Palestine, and it mentioned that in the 4th century, we have been past the tradition of carving olive wood by the Greek Orthodox monks, which is absolutely not correct. Because the Greek Orthodox Church, they don't appreciate carving of the statues or olive woods. Their specialty is icons or the painting or, let's say, writing of the icons. And if you go to an Orthodox Church, you don't see statues. So this tradition is actually passed to us, like we can start from the Crusader times till maximum 13th, 14th century. This is when the time started this carving in Palestine, in Bethlehem area. Now, when the people come here in Jerusalem to Bethlehem area, let's say 500, 600 years ago, they wanted to buy some souvenir to take back home. It was completely by hand. And, you know, people in Italy, the Italians, they have some specialty in the carvings, which is very interesting. We have some people from Beit Sahour, 500 years ago, carvings of mother of pearl, very close to my family. Let's say some from the Salsa family. They have some really good artists. This is some mother of pearl, let's say, statues of the Holy Sepulchre Church, of the Nativity Church, and till now, I think some of them in the Vatican, which is very interesting. Now, this tradition before, let's say before 1950s, it was completely by hand, by very small basic tools. I'm not sure what you call them in English, sorry about this, but they're very, very basic. In 1950s, there was introducing to electric saws, not the ones we see today, a bit different, but things starting changing a lot. And then we have the real change in the olive wood industry in 1950s when we had the copy machines. Now, the copy machine, when you put a mold, let's say you put one statue, and then you put the cutting pieces of olive wood, and it start making similar ones. And then it go through many phases while you cut them, let's say with a Dremel tool, and you carve more and more. But things starting changing fast. Instead of having, let's say, the olive wood workshop finishing 10 pieces per week, it started finishing 50 or 100 pieces per week. And this has changed many things. But it didn't affect the workers because they needed more people in the production lines in other phases. So even if we use machines these days, this is a very interesting subject. We use, let's say, scroll saws, laser machines, CNC machines. It doesn't go through one phase. It goes through many, many phases. So the least product, let's say the simplest ones, let's say a pendants or a charms, it goes through 6 or 7 or 8 phases to finish. And for complicated things like big statues or artistic ones, it goes to 25 or 30 phases. For example, the small pendant, you have to cut it on a big saw machine. First, you bring the log, you have to dry it for 6 months. And then you have to cut it. And while it's cutting, you have to put slabs of wood, one at top of the other, and make the air. It depends on the drying process. Some use air drying. Some use, let's say, ovens to dry them. And then you have to take them out. You have to stamp. That's another phase. Stamp the product. And then you have to drill it with a drill. And then you have to cut it with a scroll saw machine. And then you sand it with a hard grit. And then you sand it with a smoother grit. And then you have to paint it. And then you put the charms. And then you have to package it. So it goes through, this is the simplest one, by the way. So it goes through many, many phases. And by the way, the olive wood process is a bit dangerous. On the laser machines, it's okay. But on the saw machines, it's very dangerous. You can easily lose your fingers. My neighbor, George, maybe one day you'll meet him. He lost 2 fingers and it's really bad. By the way, the safety tools that we use in Bethlehem area is bad. It's really, really bad. And the olive wood in Bethlehem and Jerusalem areas are special. So the olive wood, let's say in Italy, in Spain, in Tunisia and other places, it doesn't, in the Mediterranean coast, it doesn't affect us because people want the Holy Land olive wood. And this is a blessing for the people, especially religious people, as olive wood is mentioned in the Bible, it's mentioned in the Old Testament, it's mentioned even in the Quran. The olive oil and the olive tree is very symbolic. And for us, let's say, as a Christian, the most important one is our Lord Jesus Christ, pray under the olive tree in the Garden of Gethsemane, and they were the silent witnesses to Jesus Christ's suffering and agony at that time. And also we have in the Old Testament, for example, we have Noah. Noah got a branch of olive tree as a sign of flood is over. And I think the front part of the ark was from the olive tree. So it's very symbolic.
Yeah, that is indeed very symbolic. I've always seen Palestinians also as being symbolized by that olive tree because the olive tree doesn't need a lot. It's not a tree that is needy. You don't need to prune it a lot. It doesn't need a lot of water. It grows in very dry areas, but it has very deep roots. And so I always feel that the Palestinians, they are rooted in their land, just like the olive trees are rooted in the land. So the olive trees that you use to make your olive wood work, where do they come from? What kind of, do you use only olive wood or do you also use other wood? Can we talk about the wood?
The wood that we use is the most important one is olive wood. Now, some, let's say, works in the scroll saw work and laser work, we use other wood to give it a contrast. You know, if you look at this Christmas ornament, for example, you see the front is olive wood, but the back have different kind of woods, sometimes mahogany, sometimes other woods, to make it look, let's say, new design, a new model, to make it look better. But the main thing, 99% is olive wood. Now, where we get the olive wood from? Very few from Bethlehem, very, very, very few from Jerusalem. Mostly we get it from the north. The wood in the north of West Bank, north of Palestine, is much better. It's larger and it's taller, so it's really better to get the wood from there. Now, the wood in the south, in Bethlehem area, is very, if you look at the olive trees, it's very short and it's not really good for the wood carving. So that's why we prefer from, let's say, areas close to Nazareth, for example, close to Tubas, and those areas that we prefer to get the olive wood from.
And how does that work? Like, do you have connection to farmers there? Do they just cut up any kind of tree? Do they grow the trees especially for the wood? What are the prices of the wood?
The prices of the wood before COVID-19, it was approximately 2,000 till 3,000 shekels. In the 1980s, it was like 70 Jordanians dinaris per 1 ton. That's like 300-400 shekels. It was way cheaper, but today is way more expensive. Now we get the wood from wholesalers who buy the wood from farmers. They gather it and they separate it. Some of the olive wood, they use it for, let's say, burning, for the stoves, for the ovens, the bakeries. And the good ones, that's bigger and nicer ones, we buy it and they sell it to us for olive wood. And we call it San'a, which means, let's say, San'a wood, khashab al-San'a. You know, that's like the wood for the industry or the wood for the olive wood carving, and it's more pricey. During COVID-19, the price of the olive wood went down because nobody's buying, nobody's working in this industry. And now it is 1,000 shekels till 1,200, 1,500 approximately per 1 ton of olive wood. Yeah, but before COVID-19, 2019, it went really a lot up.
And can you tell us a bit, you said already a little bit, but can you tell us a little bit more about the carving process? Because when I look around myself here, I see some of the statues have such details. For example, there's a man. Is this a prophet or?
This one is Saint Francis, because how you know he's a Saint Francis, he's have the animals with him. He used to love the animals. So this is a very famous one of Saint Francis, the Assisi. Now, this one goes through many phases. If you can see, this one's phases is different than the ornaments. So by the way, every workshop specializes in their own production line. So for example, sometimes workshops specialize in more than one production line, but usually it's just one. For example, the workshop that makes statues, they don't make crosses, for example. So the statues like this one or the figurines, it goes different phases than the crosses. It need different machinery and it need different expertise. So it's much different. Now, this one, it goes through sanding, but different sanding than the table sanding machine, for example. This one, you have to put it on the Dremel tool, the small bits, and change it to sand. And also, this one, it takes between 10 to 15 different pieces of a Dremel tool, of cutting pieces, because everyone have its own carving. For example, you see the lines here is different than this one. It's different than one that cut this. And this is the base. The bases also need different process. So this one, it easily takes more than 20 phases of carving, at least 20, and have to be dried very, very, very well. If it's not dried well, it's gonna split and crack. So you see this one, it's have been here for over a year and you don't see any splits or cracks because it's very good dried. Now, maybe if you look around, you're going to find a piece with a split and cracks like that one. It's have a splitting because it wasn't dried very well. And this one, people obviously see it and they don't buy it. So we either have to fix it with a wood filler or we have to throw it away or just give it to the church or somebody.
I wonder, like this statue, I think it's about 30, 40 centimeters in height. And it has so many small details. There are so many different lines and different dots. How much time would it take to make one item like this?
If you want to finish the item from start to finish, but you don't just work on one. They usually work on a batch of 6 pieces together, of 12 pieces together. So approximately it needs, let's say, a couple of weeks to finish them. Yeah, because they don't follow it together. They have to finish one phase and then leave it and finish another phase and leave. For example, the wood filler, you have to leave it for 1 or 2 days after you finish it. For the sanding, the same. By the way, this one, first, they give it the first, let's say, like a lacquer, the spray, the painting. First, they spray it. This is the base, the first time. And then they sand it. And then they spray it again and sand it with more smoother grit. And then it comes to the final, let's say, spraying phase. So till the smoothest part. If you look how smooth it is. So it takes very long time to finish. But even imagine before, these days it is affordable. And it's used machinery and it's finished faster than before. Before they used to finish one piece. Every piece is artistic piece. It take them, let's say, very long time. Let's say before 1970s, let's say. take them, let's say, a month just to finish maybe 1 or 2 pieces. So it was really difficult and more expensive and more labor expensive to finish any work at that time.
So how much money would this one cost, for example?
Now, this one, for example, if you look at the price here, it is $200. Yeah. So it depends which item, how much details it has. By the way, we have some carvers in Bethlehem who are very famous. You see the faces, the detail of the faces. They make it very, very detailed, which is obviously make the price more expensive. So maybe you have 2 pieces, both are, let's say, 30 centimeters. That's like maybe 7-8 inches. So both are 8 inches, let's say, in the height, but one is more detailed and one is less detailed. Now, the more detailed one is obviously more expensive. Also, people prefer to have nice grain of the olive. Oh, this is something, I forgot this. This is very interesting. The grains of the olive tree, which is make it very unique. You can't find 2 pieces alike. Each piece is unique in its own way, just like us humans. Every one of us is unique. So this is what makes the olive woods very nice. So, sometimes when we used to have tourists, like, look, this one have a crack or a split. Like, it's okay. It's just like us humans. Everyone have a defect in our own way,
Do you know how many olive wood factories are there still in the Bethlehem area? And are there still those who do not use any machinery?
The problem is with counting the olive wood workshop is a bit problematic. Why? Because most people who work in this industry, they work in their homes. They have like a small basement or small garage next to their house where they make these carvings. So they're not registered in municipality, not registered in Bethlehem Chamber of Commerce. They are not registered anywhere. So it's hard to count them, understand me. And many people work in the olive wood as a part-time. It depends about the person, but the registered ones, we have approximately more than 200 olive wood registered workshops, and some vary. Some have 1, 2, 5 people, some have even more. And this is only for olive wood workshop. Well, actually, way more than 200, maybe 300. In Bethlehem Governorate, we have more than 300. And some employ more than 10 or 20 people working in that olive wood workshop. So it is very important for Bethlehem Governorate, the handicrafts business, and the tourism in general. But let's say in Bethlehem area, we have more than, including their families, like 2, 3, 4,000 people depend on this olive wood industry for living. And imagine how it affected them during COVID-19. They had to go to other works to support their families.
And how do people learn this profession? Is there a school for woodwork, or is that something you learn in the family from your dad or your granddad?
More than 20 years ago, it was only learning from your grandfather or father who making this profession. Later on, when machinery started, they had to employ people. And their families didn't work in, let's say, in the olive wood industry or olive wood carving or the handicrafts industry. So they started working them in with the small salaries, low salaries, and started learning slowly. After 1, 2, 3 years, 5 years, they became a masters of their craft. And they started opening their own workshops. But for, let's say, in Europe or States, if you have profession, you have to get a certificate and regulations. We don't have such thing here. But there is a school. We once had the Silesian school. They used to teach people how to make the olive wood carvings, but not anymore. So the only way to learn it, if you want to go and, let's say, work or help somebody, and people of Bethlehem are very hospitable. They would glad to let you, let's say, help them or pay you for working with them. Yeah, but not these days. These days, there is no work. So, by the way, these days, 90% of the olive wood workshops are closed. So only 10% is working. Some are preparing. Some they won't let their staff leave their staff to help them. And some are selling outside, but very, very few.
Did you see any woodworkers changing now, because there is no much sales of souvenirs, to change to other items that are maybe more sellable in this time?
Changing to other items, no. As far as I know, or maybe people do it in a very, very low level, but most people who work in this industry, they went to work in construction, and especially in Israeli areas, because the salary there is way better. For example, you can get paid 400, 500 shekels per day. Here in Bethlehem, it's 100, 150 shekels, 200 maybe, but the average is 120 shekels. This is the average.
And if you say that they go and work on the Israeli side, does that mean that they can actually work this profession there, or they have to do something completely different?
No, they don't. By the way, in all Israel, there is Israeli areas, there is no olive wood workshops because the salary there is very expensive, the labor cost is very expensive, and nobody want to do it. People work here because it's very low, and we sell to Israeli markets, for example, Nazareth, Jerusalem areas, and our local Palestinian market, Bethlehem.
Well, especially for my friend who asked me to do this podcast, who is a woodworker. He's from Wales, and he was here. He walked around Beit Sahour, and he didn't know. Like, he came to Palestine actually after he saw an exhibition about wood, and he learned something about olive wood, and then he learned something about Palestine, and he just registered for the olive harvest program. He didn't know much about the political situation. I think he was pretty shocked when he came here and realized that Palestinians are a people under military occupation. And then one day he was walking around Beit Sahour and he saw all these olive wood workshops. And because he's a woodworker, he didn't know that about Beit Sahour. So then when he came here and he saw that, and he's a woodworker himself, he was so interested and he asked me if I can do a podcast about it. And I said, yes, I should, because it's so important for Palestine, especially for Bethlehem. So especially for him, maybe a more detailed question about the wood, because you say you are using the olive wood. What are typical aspects of the olive wood? If you want to work with olive wood, is there something specific that compared to other woods that makes it so perfect for carving? Is there something you have to treat it in a special way? You said something about needs to be very dry. So you can't cut the tree and immediately start carving.
The olive wood is known as to be a very hard wood. So it's type of the hardwood. After we cut it, we have to dry it very, very well. And well, actually, the most interesting thing about olive wood is the religious part. And it's also the most tree that we have here. So if you go around Palestinian areas in Palestine, the only thing that you're going to see is mostly olive trees. We have some other trees, but they are foreign, as you know. So olive tree is, let's say, a native tree here for a very, very long time, maybe 3,000 years or maybe more. Now, the olive tree, this interesting thing, we use it for everything. We use it for the olive oil. We use it for the anointing service, for the blessings. We use it for everything, the wood, for the stoves, for the cooking, for nearly everything. So it's part of our daily lives. And as you said, it's the rooted for us here as a Palestinians. If somebody cut you, we're going to just grow again. And the interesting thing about olive tree, you can plant it everywhere. It needs few work. You basically just plant it and go. So you basically don't do anything and you just go in the harvest times. And it depends on the rainwater. So that is what makes olive tree is a very favorite tree. But the question is that during these olive wood carvings, are there still going to be olive trees? Well, people plant them and some specific areas plant them. We don't, for the people that we work with us, we don't kill the olive trees. We only cut the branches during pruning times in October after the harvest season. So we cut the small branches and we make all those olive wood carvings. Sometimes when there is construction or settlements, they kill all the olive trees. And so people bring them and for fire or for the wood carvings, which is really sad. As you can see over the news, many of the olive trees are being removed and to change the identity of the land, which is really sad.
Yeah, I used to work for a campaign called the Olive Tree Campaign. And in the time that I worked with them, which is until 2018, the numbers were already reaching up to about 1 million olive trees that had been cut down since the occupation started by Israel for the building of the wall, for the building of settlements, for the building of bypass roads. And the olive trees were just cut down so that they could do these constructions. And thanks God, there are organizations that are replanting trees. And that's always such a beautiful saying that a wise man is the one who plants a tree under which shade he himself will never sit. Planting trees is always for the next generation. So Elias, we spoke about the souvenir shop and about the work of olive wood, but you yourself, how did you learn this skill?
My father wasn't working on olive wood at all. He was working as an IT computer. He studied at Birzeit University, so he was in the computers industry. But my grandfather, from my father's side, he was a stone carver. And it was passed to him from his father to his father. You know, the stone carvers, as we said about them in the 20th century, and They built Jerusalem and Bethlehem. And so it was really interesting, similar. But my grandfather from my mother's side, he used to be a principal of the Lutheran school in Bethlehem. And he used to sell exports in 1950s to Germany. And he used to speak German fluently. So I got it from the both sides, I guess. But I learned olive wood at a very young age working for others. And I learned it slowly. And I decided I don't want to work for others all my life. I want to open my own olive wood workshop. And I want to make my own crafts. I did, but I did many mistakes. I learned from those mistakes, especially in the olive wood process. You can't make everything. You have to specialize. You can't work for many things. You have to start from one phase and finish it to be a ready product. But when you're working on many things at the same time, it's going to get confusing. It's going to be bad. So to our friends, if you know, open an olive wood workshop in Wales, specialized in one craft, don't do many things, my friend.
Yeah. His name is Dylan. And I think that Dylan would really love to come back to Palestine one day. And I think he would love to spend some time with you in the workshop. If he came, how would you teach him? Like, if I look at these objects and let's say, forget about the steps with the rough cutting. When you want to learn those little details, how to make his mustache, how to make his beard, how to make the lines in his hairs, do you just start doing that, or is there a technique that you have to learn?
We will start with easy stuff, but working on the statues and the carving is like being an artist. You have to have an artistic background. These statues, it's like a painting. You have to paint those. You imagine it in your mind. It's going to be, let's say, rough details, and then you start carving one by one, because the copy machine, it doesn't finish it as a whole. It just gives you, let's say, a bigger part, a rough shape, and then you start carving it and giving it more details. But much other things, for example, let's say the crosses. This is the hand cross or the comfort cross. You only need to learn on the scroll saw machine, and the learning process is easier than carving the statue. Some people spend 2, 3, 5, or 10 years, and they can't reach this level. They only make the statues like this one. As you can see, this is, we call it faceless and abstract design. So it doesn't have any details, but people love this type. So some people, to reach this level, some people take 5 years, some take 10, some even 20 years, and they still can't make this kind of carving. But for example, the scroll saw machine, you can learn it in a few days. Let's say how to make a hand cross, which is pretty easy. Maybe you're going to cut your finger once or twice, but you can manage. And yeah, this is the problem. By the way, my friend Alfred, every week he's cutting one of his fingers. Yeah, by the way, this is sometimes not by his control. Alfred is an expert. He has been doing this for more than 20 years. But sometimes the blade, it breaks. And it gets in your finger, not in your control. It's going to get there anyway. So if you look at Alfred's fingers, they're all damaged.
Next time I see him, I'm going to take a look at his hands more. Yeah. The signs of your profession. My last question, Elias. How do you see your future after the COVID pandemic is over and people are starting to come back? How do you see things?
We hope for the best. We always hope for the best. We're very strong people here in Bethlehem. We are always looking for the good things. Even though we are under occupation, we're always having bad times here. Anytime tourism if there's going to become tourism soon, it's maybe be delayed because of any political in the area, in the Middle East in general. Anything happens, it affects us directly. So we're not sure, but we're always hoping for the best. We're going to make some olive wood carvings. This is a tradition. This is not by me, but passed to us as the local Palestinians in Bethlehem for generations. And we have to continue this tradition. If this tradition is going to be gone, it's going to be very sad thing in heritage. Our heritage is going to be missing a huge part of it. So we hope we're going to continue this. We will survive.
If people wanted to see some of the work, and if they wanted maybe even to order some olive wood, you never know, listeners of the podcast, do you have a website or a web shop or a place where people can go?
Yes, sure. They can visit one of our websites. It's zuluf.com, ZULUF.com, and they look at the prices and buy online, and we ship to them direct. And we'll give them, if they're in the promotion code 15 off, they will get 15 of the price there. So yeah, if you like something, or you can message Crystal and we can take care of it.
I will post a link in my show notes and the promo code. So definitely go there and you can order something for yourself, but you can also order something to give as a nice present to other people with a beautiful story and the link to this podcast so that they have a present and a story. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. It was great, Crystal. Thank you so much.
That's it for this week. If you want to visit the website of Elias to see the olive wood work, and if you want to order something online with the 15% off promo code, then go to the show notes of this podcast episode and click on the link. And of course, you can also find the links to the Facebook and Instagram and the website of Stories from Palestine and how to register for the mailing list right there in the show notes. If you want to support the podcast with a donation, it is highly appreciated because I have no other income currently. And then you can do that on the Ko-fi platform, all the links in the show notes. I'm planning to release one last episode next week before I take a podcast break. And hopefully I will fly to Holland to finally see my family again. So just follow or subscribe on your podcast player so you get notified when a new episode is online, or even better, sign up for the mailing list. I hope you will tune in again next time. Do you enjoy listening to podcasts about Palestine? There are actually quite a few now. Pretty Progressive has made a list of the top 20 podcasts about Palestine. You can find the list on their website, prettyprogressive.com/20 best podcasts about Palestine of 2021. Or scroll down in the show notes of Stories from Palestine podcast and find the link. I've also worked on 3 episodes for Pax Palestine podcast. If you haven't heard them yet, then find Pax, P-A-X, Palestine podcast on your podcast player.